Ladies and gentlemen, dear fishers, we went to Tubbataha again, and we went there to study the fish fauna. And of course, we looked at sharks. Everybody loves sharks. So, there is no reason to be afraid of sharks. And it's actually awesome to see them because having them is a sign of an intact, more or less pristine ecosystem. So when there's too much fishing, these shark species are typically the ones which disappear first. Look at this shark resting here, and there's a cleaner wrasse. And we'll get back to the cleaner wrasses later. What is a cleaner wrasse? It is a smaller fish which removes parasites from the body of big ones. And so this shark is essentially visiting the skin doctor here, where the wrasse removes parasites and bad skin from it. Now, besides fish biodiversity, we saw fish behavior, including this escape. And these are dartfish, and as their name implies, they escape very quickly into the home burrows. And to see them do that as a group is something you don't see very often, actually, outside of Tubbataha. There are so many fish in Tubbataha that their grouping behavior really changes. So here they're gone again. We saw more episodes of fish escape behavior. This is Randall's shrimp goby, and I'm also slowing this footage down. And this fish also goes into its home burrow, and this is Wheeler's shrimp goby, which does the same thing. So yes, we went to Tubbataha to do a fish biodiversity survey, and we're working on a scientific paper about the results of this survey, and we're also working on a popular science book which should be available for the next diving season in Tubbataha. There are so many different species in Tubbataha, including this tiny cryptobenthic reef fish, like this goby of the genus Tremor. So if you take your time and not just look out for all these large schools which you will find there, and for the manta rays, and for the whale sharks which you will occasionally see, you see a great variety of tiny fish species. So this is a goby of the genus Aviota. Some of the smallest vertebrate animals are in this genus. So a lot of the fish biodiversity in Tubbataha, like in every coral reef, is small. Here we have Randall's shrimp goby again. Now you might ask, do these fish even play a role in the ecology of a coral reef? Aren't they useless for the food web when they're so tiny? And the answer is no, because there are many of them and they grow very quickly. So they provide the food for a lot of mid-sized fishes. Now, we didn't only see gobies, we saw this blenny here. There's a coral blenny hiding in a burrow of a worm. And this is Exenius dilemma. And there is another goby. This is a signal fin goby. So many tiny fishes we saw. And guess what? On the way to the dives, we even saw dolphins. I don't personally study marine mammals, but it's awesome to see this. This is such a great way to welcome you to the ocean. This is another highly interesting episode of fish behavior which we observed in Tubbataha. This is commensal hunting. So you have a couple of different fish species here. You have groupers, you have a moray eel approaching, and there is a bluefin trevally, and there is a Napoleon wrasse. So all of these fish are trying to get some prey fish, which is somehow hidden below this cluster of dead corals. Now, why are they doing it? A lot of these fish have different skills when it comes to hunting. So some of them are very good at accelerating and at catching a prey fish which is trying to get away in the open water. Others, like the moray eel, are very good in going in cracks and crevices and catching prey fish there. And then when they flush them out, the fish which are in midwater have the chance to catch that fish, or the other way around. If a small fish is escaping into a crevice from a midwater predator, like the trevally on top, then the moray eel will have a chance to catch it. So the fish biodiversity and the number of fishes, of predatory fishes, is so high in Tubbataha that you see these episodes of commensal hunting much, much more commonly than in many other places where you might see once in a while one of these trevallies or a Napoleon wrest, but you don't see so many predators that they're all together. We also observed a lot of herbivorous fishes in Tubbataha. So these are surgeonfish, Canturus oliviaceus, and what they do, they feed on filamentous algae. So if there are too many of these algae, then that's a problem for the corals. The corals and these algae, they compete for space. And in a reef which is devoid of these algae-feeding surgeonfish, corals cannot recover after storm damage. So this is fantastic news to see so many surgeonfish there. These are rabbitfish, which are a different family, but they're also algae eaters. They usually travel in pairs. By the way, generally you're not supposed to touch anything, but particularly these rabbitfish you're not supposed to touch. The dorsal fins of these fish are very venomous, so if you get stung by these, you are going to be in serious pain for an extended period of time. So the herbivorous fish, both the biodiversity, meaning the different species, as well as the biomass, meaning the size and the number of these fishes, were very high in Tubbataha. Here is another surgeonfish. By the way, the name comes from that scale at their tail base, which is sharp like the scalpel of a surgeon. So this is a defensive weapon which these algae-eating fish can use to defend themselves against predatory fish. What a pretty fish here. We also saw a bunch of parrotfish. They're also herbivores, they're also algae eaters, but they feed on a different type of algae. So they essentially feed on algae which are contained in coral rubble or in the matrix of the coral rocks. A lot of different very pretty butterfly fish is another highlight of what we saw in Tubbataha. A lot of these are typically food specialists. They would feed on coral polyps or on very particular type of invertebrates. Here we have another parrotfish, and also they let you get really close in Tubbataha because they're not used to being hunted like in other places of Southeast Asia. And then we have these gigantic, these really majestic humphead parrotfish. So these are some of the few fish species which feed on live coral. They travel in these very impressive schools. This is really a sight to behold. So, and each of these fish is a meter plus, and you know, it's like a buffalo herd in midwater. There are many amazing things in Tubbataha, but this is really the highlight for me. So I was very happy to see these guys again this year. We also saw this very rare fish, which is this multi-striped angelfish, Centropygi multicinctus, and it used to be very rare, but we saw a couple more this year, and this is Centropygi fisheri, which is also really rare. There are also bigger angelfish we saw, and all of these are very colorful, very impressive fish. Same thing as with the parrotfish. They are not afraid of divers. There are no spear fishermen in Tubbataha like in other places. So you can get really close to these fish. You can observe their behavior and you can film them in a way that's really not possible if you're, for the lack of a better word, in the continental Philippines on the inhabited islands. Nobody lives in Tubbataha, of course. It's a mid-ocean atoll. This is not a particularly rare fish, still interesting to observe it. It's a spotted puffer trying to get a meal from some invertebrates which grow under this layer of corals here. And what's really interesting about this footage here, there is going to be a cleaner fish coming here trying to get a parasite of the puffer, but the puffer doesn't want to get cleaned at this point. So if you're careful and if you open your eyes, you will see all kinds of interesting interactions in Tubbataha. Now, this is Clark's anemone fish. Please don't call anemone fish Nemo. It's super childish. There are anemones and anemone fish in Tubbataha, but not as many as in many other parts of the Philippines. So my guess is that anemones do better in stressed reefs, whereas Tubbataha is really a very pristine and well-preserved reef. The fact that the currents are strong might also have something to do with it. And we saw an octopus. Actually, we saw 2 octopi during 40 dives in Tubbataha. Now, there is a famous paper, Packard 1972, The Limits of Convergence, which argues that cephalopods, squid and octopi, are essentially the mollusk versions of fish. And I think Packard has a good point, but there's still something which fish do much better, so that there's so many fish around and not that many cephalopods really. So something to think about. Finally, so many beautiful schools of jackfish in Tubbataha. There are just these walls of fish. This is really something else to experience that midwater. This is a dog-toothed tuna, massive, massive fish. This is a great predatory fish. This should not be on your pizza, in my opinion. And more canagids and a giant trevally.